it's it's either one of three. Either she's a nobody, which I don't think is the case, because that seems like a lost opportunity, or she's a Kenobi, which is cool, or she's a Skywalker. And again, I continue to lean towards her being a Skywalker. If you want to email, again, talkshownerd@gmail.com. All right, let's talk for the last part of the podcast today. Let's talk Rogue One. Rogue One being directed by Gareth Edwards. We had a few more casting announcements. What's his name now? Mendelsohn. What's his first name? Hold on. Let me go to one of my favorite Star Wars websites. Is it Dan? Is it Dan Mendelsohn? I didn't pull up. I wrote notes down, but I forgot that I was going to mention. You got Mads Mikkelsen's in it, right? He was in the James Bond movie. You've got Felicity Jones in terms of the major characters. Let's see here. Mads Mikkelsen, Felicity Jones, Belle Powley is up for a role. I've never heard of her until they mentioned it. And I can't seem to find. Sorry, I am. All right. Ben Mendelsohn. Sorry, I got it now. Ben Mendelsohn. Okay. I know he was in the TV series Bloodline. I know him. I'm probably most familiar with him from being one of the bad guys in The Dark Knight Rises. All right, so Rogue One. Rogue One has a very difficult task ahead of itself. It has to follow the Force Awakens. And now, even with that, though, it almost has to be better than The Force Awakens. It has a lot going for it, though. Look, I don't think it's going to be nearly as big as The Force Awakens was. But given the fact that this takes place right before A New Hope, I mean, talk about nostalgic. You can go right back to the aesthetic, of A New Hope, and transfer that into 2016 movie technology, storytelling, and pacing. That's really exciting. When you look at Star Wars The Force Awakens, again, you still have to go deep down the line. You've got to go, 34 years ahead when you count in the original trilogy. Rogue One has this really unique opportunity to really bring us back into the original trilogy. We hear Darth Vader is supposed to be in the film. You're going to get straight up classic stormtroopers. You're going to get straight up classic, TIE fighters and X-Wing fighters. You're going to get the Death Star, all encapsulated in a war film. It's got a lot of potential. A lot of questions on how do they handle it. I like Gareth Edwards as a director. His solo, his first movie, Monsters, kind of an independent film, was decent. I enjoyed it. I really liked Godzilla, but it had some pacing issues. So, you hope that he has enough people around him to fix those minor things. Not saying Godzilla is, comparing Godzilla to Star Wars Rogue One, but simply comparing the director's films and his style. I couldn't really tell you specifically what Gareth Edwards' style really is. I enjoyed Godzilla, but it felt a little slow, and it's hard to kind of go, well, if it's like Godzilla, but that's kind of an unfair thing to do. But I already do that with Rian Johnson. I go and watch Looper, and that, to me, visually and pacing-wise, feels a lot like A New Hope, in which case I go, oh, okay, he can handle that. I don't know that about Gareth Edwards. What I'm excited about is what this movie can do in adding to the mythology, the narrative, and filling in some of the blanks. And I know that this is going to end up being probably one of the biggest points of contention when this movie comes out. And that is how much filling in of the blanks do we as fans really, really want? When it came to the prequel trilogy, probably my chief complaint was that George Lucas did not do a good enough job filling in the blanks with what we had been told in the original trilogy. That's what I got so frustrated by. There was points where I felt like he didn't bother to watch the original trilogy. We thought that we were going to learn more about Force Ghosts and not have it. And I know we got the story of Force Ghosts in some of the Clone Wars cartoons, maybe even to a certain extent in Rebels as well, but I wanted to see it in the film. I thought there was going to be a moment where Qui-Gon is communing with Yoda. And maybe my complaints are unwarranted because then this ventures into having things explained too much to me and not bothering to, just sort of fill in the blanks in my mind. But when you think about the Luke and Leia, and when Luke in Return of the Jedi asks Princess Leia if she remembers her mother, Image is really feeling she was very beautiful but sad. And we were all sitting back going, how in the world could she be feeling that when she was a little tiny baby right before Padme died? And we got a little bit of an explanation in some of the comic books. When Obi-Wan Kenobi says, he was the best star pilot in the galaxy and a cunning warrior. Well, you got that kind of in the prequel trilogy when it came to Anakin, certainly in Revenge of the Sith. But, I wouldn't have said, I would have, if somebody asked me, what kind of pilot was Anakin? He was good. What kind of warrior was he? He was all right. I wouldn't say he was the best star pilot in the galaxy. I wouldn't say that he was a cunning warrior. Now, if you watch the Clone Wars, you get more of that. In the Clone Wars, you end up getting more of that. You get more of that vibe that you didn't get in the films. So, again, that raises the question of whether or not we want those holes filled. I personally do, which brings me back to Rogue One. So what holes can they fill? Two specific ones pop into mind. And then I'll talk about other holes, not holes, but other lines the stories could go down in other spin-off films based off of what was said in other movies. And you're welcome to send in any more of these that you like. Please do, because I know that I just kind of riffed off the top of my head and wrote a few down. I know there was a bunch more in the original trilogy, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a moment. Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com. In the beginning of A New Hope, when they're on the Death Star after capturing the princess's ship, right? Darth Vader is having a conversation with one of the Imperial officers, and he makes the comment, send a detachment down to retrieve them. See to it personally, Commander. We're talking about the droids and the escape pod. See to it personally, Commander. There'll be no one to stop us this time. They're going after the droids because they want to get the plans that were sent to Princess Leia. So now we get to find out, okay, so they were stopped. The opening crawl of the film, rebels have their first victory against the Empire. We're going to find out what that first victory was in Rogue One. Now, we're being told, spoiler alert, that Mads Mikkelsen, the actor, might be playing a character who defects, who is actually in charge of constructing the Death Star, and we're hearing that he may have taken this over from the initial plans from the Geonosians from Attack of the Clones, which I like a lot because it ties back in, of course, the prequel trilogy, and we know that the first time we actually see the Death Star is in that little palm hologram of Count Dooku on Geonosis towards the end of Attack of the Clones, saying, we have the ultimate weapon. What I like about it is here you have a chance to find out what the battle was, that the first victory they won. Why was the Empire stopped the first time? And Mads Mikkelsen might be the individual who was helping to construct the Death Star, found out what the flaw was with the exhaust port, and then defects, and doesn't tell the Empire about the design flaw. Which leads me to another hole in the film that they could fill. Towards the end, during the Battle of Yavin, an officer goes to General Tarkin and says, "We have analyzed their attack, sir, and there is a danger. Should I have your ship standing by?" Which means the Empire was completely unaware that they had a design flaw because that officer had defected. Now, see, I think that's a really, really cool way to bridge the gap on all these movies. I know there's going to be some fans that aren't going to be huge fans of that, but I think that's cool. Which brings up just a couple of other ones that down the road we could fill. The moment there's talks that Ewan McGregor is actually in talks with Disney, there was a story that came out this week about a potential project, and there's been rumors going on for a while now about an Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy. Well, a comment from Obi-Wan Kenobi, and a moment you could have in an Obi-Wan Kenobi film could be, prior to A New Hope, Sand people are easily startled, but they'll soon be back and in greater numbers. You could envision a moment in a Star Wars story spinoff film featuring Obi-Wan Kenobi where he has an experience with Sand people. Han losing the Falcon to Lando, right? Well, we get that in the Han Solo spinoff movie. The Falcon making the Kessel Run. I actually am very curious to find out if that's not going to be a very big part of the Han Solo movie. That Han Solo, making the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, and then the riffing of that comment on The Force Awakens when Rey says that he did it in 14 and Han says 12, I can't help but think that is going to be a major point of the Han Solo solo movie. There's been talk about a Boba Fett movie and Darth Vader telling Boba Fett no disintegrations. Now, for those that don't know, there's actually a rather interesting fan theory out there that line stems from the fact that Boba Fett was used by the Empire before, potentially, and he's the one who went to Tatooine and actually tracked down Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, and he's the one that burned them, which would bring about the disintegration line. But that's just been a theory of fans. The other is also the debt that Han owes to Jabba the Hutt. That's interesting. Because I believe that they came out this week and said that the Han Solo spinoff movie that we get in 2017, late 2017, right? And then we get episode 8 in 2018, is going to be... Oh, no. So we get 16 is Rogue One, 17 is episode 8, 2018 is the Han Solo movie, and 2019 is episode 9. That's right. So there you go. That's how that works. So we heard that it was going to be 10 years prior to A New Hope. I want to see those stories told. As it relates to the original trilogy, and I know some people are going to complain that, maybe they shouldn't fill in all those blanks, but those movies have been out for so long. And they're not changing. Our love of them isn't changing just because they fill in the backstory on some of those lines. And, the other part to that is, too, it really depends on how they do it, right? If they do it right, then we don't care. God, can you imagine being... one thing to be J.J. Abrams, right? But another thing to be Gareth Edwards and kind of being new to movies, having to deal with Rogue One. So I'm getting more and more excited about that movie, and we hear that we may actually get our first trailer for Rogue One coming out in May with Captain America Civil War. So that just a couple of months away, right? All right, I'm going to try to plan when Melinda, my wife, and me, and I can go to the theater and see The Force Awakens again this week. Plus, I'm going to go watch some football. So thanks for hanging out with the podcast and for downloading it. As always, please follow me subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Drop a rating or a comment. If you want to email me, again, talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter, Jon Justice, John Justice, or on Facebook. And until next week, in episode 36, may the Force be with you always.
My Nerd World.